Good morning. I'm Wendell Pis-an, so I'm reporting the Module 3. Institutional Correction of the Philippines consists history of the Bureau of Corrections. Next is 7 Institutional Corrections of the Philippines. First is the New Bilibid Prison or NBP. In Muntinlupa, Metro Manila is the main insular penitentiary designed to house the prison population of the Philippines. It is maintained by the Bureau of Corrections or BUCOR under the Department of Justice as of May 2018. The NBP housed 26,877 convicted criminals. So, in 1940, prisoners were transferred to the NBP from the old Bilibid prison, also known as Carelessly Presidio, Correctional Spanish, or for correctional jail and military prison in Manila. The remnants of the old facility was used by the City of Manila as in detention center known today as Manila City Jail. The penitentiary had an initial land area of 551 hectares or 1,360, but 104 hectares or 206 were transferred to a housing project of the Department of Justice. Additional land of the NBP reservation is used for the Bureau of Corrections headquarters. During Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II, Bilibid was a prisoner of war and civilian internee camp where American soldiers and civilians were held by the Japanese. 1,200 internees and POWs were freed by the American Army on February 4, 1945 during the Battle of Manila. The government of the Philippines plans to create a regional prison in Nueva Ecija through a public-private partnership. The old Bilibid prison, then known as a Cárcel y Presidio Correccional or Spanish Correctional Jail and Military Prison, occupied a rectangular piece of land that was part of the Mayhaliki state in the heart of Manila. The old prison was established by the Spanish colonial government on June 25, 1865 via royal decree. It is divided two sections. Number 1 is the Cárcel, which could accommodate 600 inmates. 2, the Presidio, which could hold 527 prisoners. Second is San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm. According to historical accounts, the San Ramon Prison was established in southern Zamboanga on August 21, 1870 through a royal decree promulgated in 1869, established during the tenure of Governor General Ramon Blanco, whose patron saint the prison was named after. The facility was originally established for prison convicted of political crimes, considered the oldest penal facility in the country. Prisoners in San Ramon were required to agricultural work. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, the prisoners in San Ramon were hastily released and the building destroyed. In 1907, the American administration reestablished the prison farm. In 1902, General John Pershing, Chief Executive of the Department of Mindanao and Sulu, classified the institution as a prison and penal colony and therein confined people sentenced by the courts under the jurisdiction under Pershing's supervision. Several buildings with a capacity for 600 prisoners were constructed. After several years, the colony became particularly self-supporting with 75,000 coconut trees, which were planted at the beginning of Pershing administration, contributing to the colony's self-sufficiency aside from coconuts, rice, corn, papaya, and other crops were also cultivated. On November 1, 1905, Reorganization Act number 1407 was approved, creating the Bureau of Prisons under the Department of Commerce and Police, integrating the old Bilibid Prison, San Ramon Penal Colony, and Iwahig Penal. The Philippine Coconut Authority took over management of the coconut farm from San Ramon. In 1995, Congresswoman Maria Clara Lobregat proposed the transfer of San Ramon Prison to Bongyotwon in the mountainous area of Zamboanga to give way to a special economic zone. Next is Iwahig Penal Colony. This facility was established during the American occupation. However, during the Spanish regime, the Puerto Princesa was designated as a place where offenders sentenced to banishment were exiled. A specific area of Puerto Princesa was selected as the site of correctional facility. The American military carved out a prison facility in the rainforest of Puerto Princesa. The institution had for its first superintendent Lt. George Wolfe, a member of the U.S. Expeditionary Force, who later became the first prison director. So, Governor Luke Wright authorized the establishment of penal colony in the province of Palawan on November 16, 1904. The penal settlement, which is originally compressed at an area of 22 acres, originally served as the depository for prisoners who could not accommodate at the Bilibid prison in Manila. In 1906, however, the Department of Commerce and Police, which later became the Department of Public Instruction, moved to turn the institution into the center of penal colonies supervised in accordance with strengths at the time. Through the department efforts, the Philippine Commission of the United States government passed Act number 1723 in 1907 classifying the settlement as a penal institution. So, the settlement was the first beset by attempted escape, but under the supervision of Colonel John R. White of the Philippine Constabulary, who would become superintendent of Iwahig in 1906, the colony became successful settlement. A merit system was devised for the prisoners and vocational activities were offered. These include farming, fishing, forestry, carpentry, and hospital paramedical work. Prisoners could choose the vocational activities they wanted. In 1955, Administrative Order to Number 20 was promulgated by the President and implemented by the Secretary of Justice and the Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources. This order allowed the distribution of colony lands for cultivation by deserving colonies. The order also contained a list of qualifications for colonists who wished to apply for a lot cultivate. The conditions for the settlers stay in his land, loan requirements, and marketing of settlers produce. Lots granted did not exceed 6 hectares. On August 16, 1959, a committee was created by President Carlos P. Garcia to study the State National Prison. Accordingly, prisoners in Iwahig were divided into two groups, the settlers and colonies. The settlers are those engaged in farming for their own benefit. They are the ones whose applications for land to cultivate has been approved. The government furnishes the land and initial requirements for tools, dwelling, and beasts of burden. They are required to reimburse expeditors incurred for their maintenance and that of their families out of the products of their farms. Upon their release from the colony, they receive whatever amount of money they have created in their favor after deducting the obligation they have. Iwahig is subdivided into four zones of district. Central Sub-Colony with an area of 14,700 hectares, Santa Lucia with 9,685 hectares, Montebol with 8,000 hectares, and Inagawan with 13,000 hectares. Recent development and presidential proclamation have dramatically reduced the size of the prison reservation of Iwahig. So, number 4 is Correctional Institution for Women. In a report dated January 22, 1959, submitted to committee created by Administrative Order number 287 by President of the Philippines, it was that before a separate building was constructed especially for women prisoners, all female convicts were confined at the old Bilibid prison on Azgaraga, St. Manila. The male prisoners were confined in dormitories near the women's quarters because of their conditions. Vocational activities of the women prisoners were limited to embroidery. When they became ill, the women were confined in a separate building which served as a hospital with nurses and prison physicians. When women prisoners needed surgery, they were separated on the Bilibid prison. After the operation, they were transferred to the infirmary for convalescence. Prison authorities were aware of the condition that women prisoners had to endure. Consequently, the transfer of the women to a separate site became inevitable after a series of negotiations started by Prison Director Ramon Victorio. The Philippine legislature passed Republic Act number 3579 in November 1929. It authorized the transfer of all women inmates to a building on Welfareville at Mandaluyong, Rizal, and appropriated 6,000 pesos for the move. 60,000 for the move. On February 14, 1931, the women prisoners were transferred from the old Bilibid prison, the building specially constructed for them. It all named Women's Prisons was changed to Correctional Institution for Women. This was keeping with emerging trends in penology with emphasized correction rather than punishment. Convicts were brought back into the social mainstream, adjusted and rehabilitated with a better outlook in life. CIW, according to a Senate report, occupied 18 hectares. The original structure was one-story building which housed the office, the brigade's restrooms. The building has a central courtyard with trees and flowering plants. The prisoners' vocational activities were expanded to include poultry and piggery, as well as cultivation of crops. Flowers and fruits, living quarters for the institution employees were later constructed in the compound during the Japanese occupation. The CIW, despite a drastic reduction in the number of its employees, continued with its work. A number of female military prisoners were also confined in the institution. They were later freed by the USA Army. After the war, the CIW resumed its normal operation. Weekly catechism classes were introduced. A dental clinic was built. Local telephones were installed in the guards' quarters. The Bureau of Public Works and major repairs of the main building and workshop and infirmary were constructed for inmate use. The infirmary during that time could accommodate around 16 patients in 2000. A new four-story building was constructed by the Department of Public Works within the grounds of CIW. It is the growing congestion in the facility. The CIW, with a capacity for only 200 inmates, had accommodated 1,000 inmates. Number 5, Davao Penal Colony. The Davao Penal Colony is the first penal settlement founded at organized under Philippine administration. The settlement, which is originally had an area of approximately 30,000 hectares in the district of Panabo and Tagum. Davao del Norte was formally established on January 21, 1932 by virtue of an act number 3732. This act authorized the Governor-General to lease or seal the lands, building an improvement in a San Ramon prison and a Wahig penal colony. It also granted authority to the Secretary of Justice to establish a new prison and penal colony in a suitable public land. A budget of 500,000 pesos was allocated. Several committees were created to pick a suitable site for the penal settlement. In accordance with the recommendation of these committees, Governor Dwight Davis signed promulgation number 414 on October 7, 1931, which reserved a site for the penal colony in Davao Province in Mindanao. The site offered ideal conditions for agricultural activities. During World War II, the colony was converted into a concentration camp where more than 1,000 Japanese internees were committed by the Philippine Armed Force. The Japanese were treated in accordance with the orders of the American commanding officer. On December 20, 1941, the Japanese Imperial Forces attacked the Davao and the colony was among the establishment taken over confusion and a great number of prisoners escaped. Normal operations were inevitable disturbed. November 8, 1942, a representative of the Director of Prisons transferred the colony and its properties to the Japanese authorities. The remaining colony employees, their families, and the inmates evacuated to Iwahig where they organized the Davao Penal Colony at Inagawan Sub-Colony, Palawan. The organization of the colony in exile was authorized by virtue of Memorandum Order number 60 dated June 28, 1943 and signed by the Director of Prisons. After the liberation of the Philippines, the colony in exile in Palawan returned to its old site in Davao. A great deal of rebuilding repair had to be done because the war had almost completely destroyed the colony. Number 6 is Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm. Nearer to Manila than other penal colonies, the Sablayan Penal Colony is located in Occidental Mindoro and relatively new. Established on September 26, 1954 by virtue of Presidential Proclamation number 72, the penal colony has a total land area of approximately 16,190 hectares. Prison records show the first colonists and employees arrived in Sablayan on January 15, 1955. Since then, several buildings have been constructed including the colonies, dormitories, employees' quarters, guardhouse, schoolhouse, chapel, recreation hall, and post exchange. Three subcolonies were later organized. One is a reservation, which they remains part of protected rainforest. Another is a coastal area. The third was used the national government as a relocation site for refugees from the eruption of Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991. Sablayan Prison is a facility where prisoners from NBP are brought for decongestion purpose. It follow it follows the same colony standard as other penal farms. Number 7 is Leyte Regional Prison. The Leyte Regional Prison, situated in Aboyog, Southern Leyte, was established a year after the declaration of martial law in 1972 by virtue of Presidential Decree number 28, while its plantela and institutional plan were almost ideal. Lack of funds made the prison unable to realize its full potential, and its facilities are often below par compared with those of other established penal farms. The LRP has an inmate capacity of 500. It followed the same agriculture format as the main correctional program in addition to some rehabilitation activities. The prison and admit convicted offenders from Region 6 and from the National Penitentiary in Muntinlupa. Concise history of the Bureau of Corrections. Correctional in the Philippines started during pre-colonial times. It was, however, organized on individual community basis. It was only during the Spanish regime when an organized corrective service was made operational. When the Americans took over in the 1990s, the Bureau of Prison was created under the Pre-Organization Act of 1905, Act number 1407, dated November 1, 1905. The main penitentiary was the Old Bilibid Prison in Oroquita Street, Manila, which was established in 1847 pursuant to Section 1708 of the Revised Administrative Code. It was formally opened by a royal decree in 1865. About 4 years later, or on August 21, 1869, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga City was established for confined Muslim rebels and recalcitrant political prisoners opposed to the Spanish rule. The facility, which faces Hulu Sea, has the Spanish-inspired dormitories and originally sit on 1,414 hectares sprawling estate. When the Americans took over in the 90s, the Bureau of Prison was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905, Act number 1407, dated November 1, 1905, as an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. It also paved the way for the re-establishment of San Ramon Prison in 1907, which was destroyed during the Spanish-American War on January 1, 1915. The San Ramon Prison was placed under the auspices of the Bureau of Prison and started receiving prisoners from Mindanao. Produce were transported through rail tracks, a mode which the Americans instructed to prison. Prisoners had to contend with dilapidated facilities within the cramped area. Before the reconstruction of San Ramon, the Americans established in 1904 the Luhit Penal Settlement, now Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, on a vast reservation of 28,072 hectares. It was reached an aggregate total land of area of 4,000 hectares in the late 1950s. It was located on the westernmost part of the archipelago and far from the main town to confine incorrigibles who the government had found little hope of rehabilitation. The area expanded to 41,007 hectares by virtue of Executive Order Number 67 issued by Governor Newton Gilbert on October 15, 1912. Other penal colonies were established during the American regime. On November 27, 1929, the Correctional Institution for Women, or CIW, was created under Act Number 3579, while Davao Penal Colony in Southern Mindanao was opened in 1932 under Act Number 3732. The CIW was founded to provide separate facilities for women offenders and to cater to their gender difference. To date, it is the lone women's prison in the country. Owing to the increasing number of committals to the old Bilibid prison in Manila, the new Bilibid prison was established in 1935 in southern suburb of Muntinlupa. Rizal, the old prison was transformed into a receiving center as a storage facility for farm produce coming from the colonies. It is presently abandoned and under the jurisdiction of the Public State Authority. Prisoners have to build their basic housing areas house using materials available in the prison reservation. After the American regime, two or more penal institutions were established. These were Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm of Occidental Mindoro, or Proclamation Number 72, issued on September 26, 1954, and later Regional Prison under Proclamation Number 1101, issued on January 16, 1973. The Bureau of Prison was renamed of Bureau of Corrections under the Administrative Code of 1987, issued on November 23, 1987, and Proclamation number 495 of the President. It is one of the attached agencies under the supervision and control of the Department of Justice. Bureau Corrections, or BUCOR. BUCOR has its principal tasks the rehabilitation of national prisoners, or those sentenced to serve a term of imprisonment of more than 3 years. Since its creation, the BUCOR has involved with modera penology and the shifted from the traditional view of imprisonment as society retribution against criminal offenders into one which regards imprisonment as a humanizing and enriching experience. Correction focus on rehabilitation and regards inmates and as patients who need treatment and guidance in order to become productive and responsible members of society upon their release. At present, Bucor has 7 prison facilities for in 26,792 prisoners. It has 1 prison institution for women and 1 vocational training center for juveniles. All prison institutions have their own reception of diagnostic center, or RDC, classification board, rehabilitation and vocational training programs, inmate compliance, information and assistance center, or ICIAC, inmate council and board of discipline. Thus, discipline, RDC receives, studies and classifies inmate, committed to BOCOR, The classification board classifies inmate according to their security status. To extend prompt, efficient, and timely service to inmates, Booker created ICIA, which is tasked to act within 72 hours on all the compliance requests for information and assistance for inmates. The Booker compliance or requests made by inmates or compliance against the employees or co-inmates, status of prisoner release, computations of the good conduct and time allowance, and problems regarding visitors, visit the inmates council, which is composed of finally convicted inmate, serve as a advisory body of superintendent of each institution. The board of discipline hears compliance and grievances with regard to violation of pers- uh, person rules and regulations. The efficient and administrative of criminal justice is a prerequisite to a country national development. The human treatment of persons deprived of liberty and their preparation for reintegration upon release are two of the key indicators of efficient criminal justice administration. Current assessment of these two key indicators suggests that the Philippines lag behind compared to similar situated countries or ICPS 2014 with the passage of the modernization law of the Bureau of Correction. Booker in 2013, however, the Philippine government is currently engaged in the multiple efforts to improve the correctional pillar of its criminal justice. The modernization law of the Booker mandates reform in three key areas. First is mandates the professionalism of correctional person by increasing the number, quality, and basic pay of staff. Second is mandates the upgrading of facilities and equipment in order to provide for the safe and humane custody of inmates. And third is it mandates the restructuring of the organization and the introduction of modern correctional practices to increase its institutional capacity in reforming inmates and in preparing them for eventual reintegration to society. In order to successfully reform the Bukor, a grounded understanding of current problems, the organization needs to be in order. The Bukor, especially in flagship institution, the New Bilibid Prison or NBP, is always under media spotlight due to the observance of practices that are considered scandalous by outside observers. One of the latest scandals that troubled the Bukor was the incident of high-profile inmates who find sickness and abuse their medical passes to conduct business in the outside of as shown in CCTV footage. The captured lapses in security protocol among escorting guards de Jesus 2014 in previous years, rich inmates had been discovered to maintain luxurious lifestyle inside the prison, Ramos and Induzo 2011. The common response to this media expose had been suspensions or transfer of prison guards, which are the short-term resolution to long-embedded problems. This sensationalized media reporting captures only a small portion of the resultant panel practices in the NBP and other penal facilities, given the decades of neglect to the penal institutions, or COA Report 2005. There emerged practices that were initially introduced as stopgap measures but have become during features of the penal management. Example of this is Practices include the mayor's obol inmate, patakaran, takal, pangkat, and very important is priso, VIPs. These practices are unique adaptations to the inadequacy in the of resources of personnel, facilities, and programs that characterize the Bukor. These practices generate short-term benefits but also induce long-term negative impact and penal management. These practices are not officially acknowledged, and the absence of formal policies guiding their use translate into the abuse and corruption. Efforts for the Bucor, however, necessarily initial a holistic understanding of these ingrained practices of as failure to acknowledge their interior relatedness may thwart any reform initiative. For example, is effort to eradicate the practice of mayors may exacerbate the condition if the root cause of the problem, which is the lack of personnel, is not addressed in the Philippines. Is not addressed in the first place. This paper presents an analytical framework for understanding the Bucor. It presents empirical narrative data gathered through participatory workshop, focus group, discussions, interview, and surveys among personnel, inmates, and prison volunteers that were conducted in the summers of 2013 and 2014. This paper brings disparate information reported by a media and casual observance about life inside Philippine prisons into a holistic and cogent perspective. Especially, the aim of this paper is to provide a holistic assessment of the conditions of the Bucor, especially its flagship institution, the New Bilibid Prison or NBP. It will describe how current penal conditions subvert the four areas of correctional management, namely inmate, classification, housing placement, inmate programming, and documentation and assessment. From the presentation of current condition, this paper outlines the ingredients of an holistic reform package toward a modernized Bukor that adhere to principles of effective correctional management. Especially, this paper outlines how 2,000 inmates population regional prisons can be achieved in the current Philippines context in lieu of the overcrowded, outmoded, and criminogenic New Bilibid Prison. Code of Kalantiao. You shall not, Article number 1, you shall not kill, neither shall you steal, neither shall you do harm to the age, lest you incur the danger of death. All these who infringe this order shall be condemned to death by being drowned in the river or boiling water. Article number 2. You shall obey. Let all your deeds with the headman be met punctually. He who does not obey shall receive for the first time 100 lashes. If the debt is large, he shall be condemned to thrust his hand in boiling water. For the second time, he shall be beaten to death. Article number 3, obey you. Obey you, let one have women that are very young, nor more than he can support, nor be given to excessive lust. He who does not comply with obey and observe this order shall be condemned to swim for 3 hours for the first time, and for the second time to be beaten to death with sharp sharp thorns. Article number 4. Observe, let number let no one disturb the quiet of the graves when passing by the cave and trees where they are. Give respect to them. He who does not observe this shall be killed by ants or beaten to the death with thorns. Article number 5. You shall obey he who exchanged for food, let it be always done in accordance with his word. He who does not comply shall be beaten for 1 hour. He who repeats the offense shall be expected for 1 day among ants. Article number 6. You shall be obliged to riverside that are held in respect, such as those of trees of recognized worth and other site. He who fails to comply shall pay with 1 month work in gold or in honey. Article number 7. These shall be put to death he who kills trees of venerable appearance, who shoot arrows as at night at men and women. He who enters the houses of the headmen without permission. He who kills a shark or strike cayman. Article number 8. Slavery for a certain period of time shall be suffered by those who steal away the woman of the headman, by him who keep it, tempered dogs that bite the headman, by him or who burns the fields of another. Article number 9. All these shall be beaten for 2 days, who sing while traveling by night, kill the manual, tear the documents belonging to the headman, are malicious liars, or who mock the dead. Article number 10. It is decreed as obligation that every mother teach secretly to her daughters matters pertaining to lust, and prepare them for womanhood, not meant for cruel near punishment their women when they catch them in the act of adultery. Who, however, shall disobey shall be killed by being cut of pieces and thrown to the caimans. Article number 11. These shall be burned who by their strength cunning have mocked at and escaped punishment, or who have killed young boys, or tried to steal away the women of the elders. Article number 12. They shall be drawn all who interfere with their superiors or their owners or inmate or masters, all those who abuse themselves through their lust, those who destroy their anitos or idols by breaking them or throwing them down. Article number 13. All these shall be exposed to ants for half a day, who kill black cats during a new moon, or steal anything from the chief or agurangs, however small the object may be. Article number 14. They shall be made slave for life who have beautiful daughters and deny them to the sons of chief, and with bad faith hide them away. Article number 15. Concerning belief and superstitions, these shall be beaten who eat the deceased flesh of beast which they hold in respect, or the herb which is they consider good, who wound or kill the young of the manual or white monkey. Article 16. The fingers shall be cut off all those who break idols of wood and clay in their alangans and temples, of those who destroy the daggers of the tagalons or break the drinking jars of the latter. Article number 17. They shall be killed who profane sites where idols are kept and sites where are buried the sacred things, or their diwatas and headmen, he who or perform his necessities in those places shall be burned. Article 18. Those who do not cause their rules to be obeyed, if they are headmen, they shall be put to death by being stoned and crushed, and if they are gurangs, they shall be placed in rivers to be eaten by sharks and caimans. Public Attorney Office or PAO. Public Attorney's Office or PAO is a attached agency of the Department of Justice which is provide indigent litigants free legal assistance. The PAO shall be an independent and autonomous office but attached to the Department of Justice in accordance with Section 38, Chapter 7 of Book 4 of this Code for purposes of policy and program coordination. The PAO shall the principal law office of the government extending free legal assistance to indigent persons in criminal, civil, labor, administrative, and other quasi-judicial case. Powers of function. The PAO shall independent discharge in mandate to render free or charge legal representation, assistance, and counseling to indigent person in criminal, civil, labor, administrative, and other quasi-judicial cases. In the exigency of the service, the PAO may be called upon by proper government authorized to render such service to another person, subject to existing laws, rules, and regulation. Mission. The Public Attorney Office extends to provide the indigent litigants, the oppressed, marginalized, and underprivileged members of the society free access to court, judicial, and quasi-judicial agency by rendering legal services, counseling, and assistance in consonance with the constitutional mandate that free access to courts shall be not denied to any person by reason of poverty, in order to ensure the rule of law and truth and social justice as a components of the country's sustainable development. Vision. A government agency that is God-centered and dynamic bureaucracy that is responsive to the ever-growing legal needs of the indigent and oppressed, led by highly competent, world-class, development-oriented, honest, dedicated, and nationalistic leaders and lawyers. So that's all. Thank you for listening.